Have an official's blessing. Tian Guan Ci Fu by Mo Xiang Tong Xiu. Read by Plant Bones. Chapter 14, Part 2. Admiring the flower through red clouds, a heart full of affection. After a soundless sigh, Xielian stepped forward and said gently, "In that case, please let me have a try." Upon hearing his voice, the shadow behind the red curtain paused. Then the figure slowly rose to his feet. The croupier in front of the curtain smiled. "Then, will this Gongzi please come forth?" Within the hall, crowds of humans and ghosts all parted for this brave warrior. When Xielian reached the end of the path, the croupier presented him with a polished black gambling cup in her hands. "Please, go ahead, Gongzi." To all the previous gamblers, she'd always used a casual way of speaking. Despite her ordinary words she uttered, her tone wasn't polite in the slightest. However, to Xielian now, not only had she started using honorifics, the tone she used was also exceedingly polite and respectful. Xielian received the black gambling cup from her with a word of thanks, and lightly cleared his throat. Since he'd never touched anything of this sort before, he shook the cup randomly for a good while, and pretended he knew a thing or two. As he moved his hands, he looked up and glanced at Lang Tinto hanging above. Lang Tinto stared back at him, wide-eyed and pitiful, but thankfully he didn't make a sound. His expression made Xielian want to laugh for some reason, but he held it back. After a long time, he finally stopped. Countless pairs of eyes were intently focused on the cup in his hands, and Xielian felt that somehow this tiny little gambling cup had grown incomparably heavy. He didn't know if there was a right way to flip it. However, just as he was about to reveal the outcome, the croupier stopped him. "Wait." "What is it?" Xielian asked. The croupier replied, "Chengxu said that your cup-shaking posture isn't quite right." Xielian thought to himself, "So there really is a correct way of doing this? Could all my bad luck earlier be due to my bad posture?" He asked modestly, "Then may I ask what the correct posture is?" The croupier responded, "Chengtiu has invited you to come up, as he is willing to teach you, Gongzi." Upon hearing this, the crowd of ghosts within the den drew sharp breaths. Xielian heard the ghosts grumble.
"To think Chengju is going to teach him. That's a first. Does that mean he's gonna die? Chengju wants to what? Just who is this? Why teach him?"
"Shaking a cup is shaking a cup. What kind of correct posture is there?" Xielian was thinking the same question, but the croupier had already motioned him toward the red curtains. "Please." Thus Xielian arrived at the front of the red curtains, with the black wooden gambling cup clutched in his hands. The silk curtains swayed gently, almost giving life to the red silhouette. The person behind the curtains was standing directly in front of him, with only half an arm's distance between them. Xielian held his breath as a hand parted the heavy red curtains and landed perfectly under his own, supporting the gambling cup. This was a right hand, slender and pale, and the well-defined fingers had a red string tied around the third digit. Against the pitch-black wooden cup, the white appeared even paler, and the red even more vivid. Slowly, Xielian lifted his eyes. A youth, roughly 18 or 19 years of age, stood silently behind the cloud-like silk-red curtains. It was Sun Lung. His robes were still the same maple red, his skin still white as snow. It was the same uniquely handsome and dangerously sharp youthful face, but its contours were now slightly more defined. While he could still be called a youth, he could also be called a man. The shyness of boyhood had evolved into a composed calm. The sheer wildness between his brows reflected his pride. The same eye that twinkled like a star was now gazing deeply, unblinkingly at Xielian. However, though as bright as a star, there was only one, the left eye. The other was hidden behind a black eye patch. The red silk curtains were only open a small slit. In his possession, Xiaolian was the only one who could make out the person behind the curtains, since he was blocking the view from everyone else in the hall. Not that they would dare to sneak a peek anyway. That left eye watched Xiaolian, and Xiaolian returned the gaze, subconsciously drawn to it. This time, Huatang looked not only a few years older, but he'd also grown taller. Before, when Xiaolian had looked at him, he could maintain eye contact comfortably, but now he had to strain his neck to look up. After they had both stared for a good long while, Huatang finally broke the silence. He said in a deep voice, "Would you like to bet high or low?" It was this deep voice, pleasant to the ears, that pulled Xiaolian back to reality. As it made no difference how he bet, he answered, high. "Fine," Huatang replied. "Then I'll roll first." Xiaolian's left hand supported the base of the black gambling cup, while his right hand covered the circular lid. Huatang stood in front of him, and with his right hand covering Xiaolian's left, he guided him to shake lightly before lifting the lid. There were 2 dice at the bottom of the cup, 6 and a 5. Lang Chen-chou, from where he had been hanging above them, had a clear view and saw how easily he rolled such a high number. His eyes widened and he exclaimed in awe, "How did that happen?" Huatang loosened his hand slightly and beckoned to Xiaolian. "Shake it like this. Now you try." Xiaolian mirrored his actions and shook the cup twice, but Huatang said, "Not like that." Even though he was reprimanding Xiaolian, his tone was exceedingly gentle and patient. As he explained, Huatang supported Xiaolian's hand with his own again, but this time his left hand found its way to Xiaolian's right, the one covering the lid. He instructed softly, "Like this." And just like that, the backs of Xiaolian's hands were enveloped by Huatang's palms. When skin touched skin, Huatang's hands felt temperate like jade. The exquisite silver embraces that Huatang wore were as cold as ice, and yet his movements were careful. He never allowed them to touch Xiaolian's skin. His hands guided Xiaolian's and shook the black wooden gambling cup in a rhythm that was neither hurried nor slow. Once, twice, thrice. Clack, clack, clack. There was a crisp rattling sound of 2 dice colliding and entangling with each other as they bounced inside the black cup. Even though the shakes were gentle, Xiaolian could feel waves of numbness traveling from the backs of his hands, along his arms, spreading to the rest of his body. As he shook, Xiaolian lifted his eyes to sneak a peek at the other person, and realized that Huatang wasn't looking at the gambling cup at all. Instead, he was watching him intently, the corners of his mouth curved up. Xiaolian couldn't help but return that smile, but he immediately controlled himself when he remembered the crowd of humans and ghosts watching him from above and below. He lowered his head and diligently studied the gesture that Huatang had showed him. "Like this?" The smile curving Huatang's lips deepened. That's right, just like that." After Xiaolian shook the cup a few more times, full of hope, he suggested, "Why don't you take a look?" Xiaolian lifted the lid and saw 2 white dice at the base. It was 2 threes. Rolling 2 threes was already an impossible feat for him. It was like a gentle spring breeze had brushed past Xiaolian's heart, and he thought, could I actually have learned the trick? However, as shocking as the outcome was, 6 was still slightly less than 11. He cleared his throat and admitted, "I'm sorry, I've lost." But Huatang replied, "Don't worry. This round doesn't count. I'm teaching you right now. Try again." At those words, Lang Tinto and Xie Qingxuan gawked. The crowd of ghosts in the hall all stared with their mouths agape. Then they started to grumble.
What's with Xiu? I thought he was going to show him who's boss, but he's actually teaching him for real?
How can you not count this round? Can you even gamble like that?
If that doesn't count, when will it count? Looks like Xiu's in a really good mood today.
Hua Chang quirked his left brow, and the croupier standing to the side immediately shushed the crowd. Everyone, please be quiet. In the blink of an eye, the hall went silent again. Although no one dared to speak, their stares were more intense. Hua Chang chuckled softly and whispered words of encouragement into Xie ear. Again? It might have been because there were too many humans and ghosts packed into the gambler's den, but Xie felt his face starting to heat up. Okay. Rattle, rattle. He shook twice more. This time, when he revealed the cup, it was 2 4s. See? Isn't it a little higher this time? Hua Chang asked. Although Xie felt that something was off, he still nodded his head. Yes, it's a little higher. Hua Chang encouraged. You did well. Keep going. With those words of encouragement coming one after another, for some reason giggles could be heard all around the hall. Judging by the voices, it apparently came from the female ghosts. Xie couldn't figure out what exactly constituted the correct posture. At first, he simple-mindedly paid close attention to how Hua Chang positioned his hands, how he managed the pace, and how he grasped the cup. But now he was letting Hua Chang's hands lead him as he shook the dice blindly. As he shook, suspicion in his mind grew stronger and stronger. Could Sanlang be teasing me? Lang Zhenqiu, who had been watching from above, probably felt the same and couldn't help but speak. You! Stop shaking the cup! He's obviously playing with you! There's no such thing as correct posture! He must be cheating! Hearing that loud, boisterous voice, Xie Qingxuan covered his face again. The ghost below hushed heartily, and a rain of dice was hurled at Lang Zhenqiu, and they jeered him loudly.
Ignorant child, stop talking. So noisy. Just getting to the exciting part. That Dao Zhang's rolls get higher each time he follows our Changji's teachings. That's undeniable truth.
That's right. What do you know? Lang Zhenqiu was furious. You unruly, bald-faced liars! Ah! He suddenly stopped mid-sentence, and his face turned bright red. A couple of female ghosts below him had actually brutally yanked on his dangling belt and scolded him aloud.
Xiao Didi, stop causing a ruckus. If you keep on spouting nonsense, as Gigi will pull off your pants.
Lang Zhenqiu had never been threatened like this before, and he was so angry he was rendered speechless. You! Getting beaten to a pulp by a mob of ghosts would have been fine, but having his pants pulled off would be a dreadful embarrassment for a dignified martial god like him. Immediately, Lang Tinto didn't dare say anything more. Xie looked up and saw the other god sending him eye signals with all his might. It was both hilarious and pitiful, so he could only lower his head. Xie looked at Hua Chang and pleaded in a small voice. Sanlang. Hearing his tone, Hua Chang chuckled. Leave him be. Let us continue. Xie gave up and once again held the cup and shook twice. As expected, this time he got 2 5s. The crowd cheered harder at this, and their teasing of Lang Tinto grew more frenzied.
Did you see that? Higher than last time.
But Xie had already realized that Hua Chang was just fooling around with him. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was sure there was indeed no such thing as the correct posture, and to someone like him, any posture would be incorrect. From here on, he might as well give up any hope of transforming his luck. Just as he was about to give up and expose himself on this last shake, Hua Chang stopped him. Wait. Cielian could feel the hands covering his press down a little harder, so he stopped moving altogether. What's wrong? Hua Chang asked, half jokingly. I don't believe this Guga has mentioned what will happen should he lose. Hearing him call Xialian Guga, Xie Qingxuan and Lang Tinqiu both wore complicated expressions on their faces. The crowd of ghosts also felt massive shivers run down their spines, and there were even a few who were so shocked their heads dropped to the ground. It was a little embarrassing to say, but because he was in such a hurry before, Xialian hadn't considered his side of the bet. At first, he considered also betting 10 years of his life, but a heavenly official's lifespan was quite long, so 10 years probably wasn't worth very much. Money or treasure? He didn't have any. Spiritual power? He didn't have much of that either. Celian surprisingly couldn't think of anything he could bet at the moment, so he could only ask advice from the owner of the gambler's den. Do you think there's anything on me that's worth betting? Huatang chuckled at the question. Anything's fine. What have you got on you? Celian pondered briefly, then lightly coughed and told the truth. Um, I only have a half-eaten bun with me. Huatang burst out laughing. Even though he laughed, no one else dared to do the same, even if they wanted to. When he finally settled down, Huatang nodded. Yes, that's fine. The bun will do. The moment he spoke those words, they not only shocked the crowd of ghosts, but the croupiers at the gambling table as well. Since the opening of this gambler's den, there had been countless inconceivable bets made. Organs, lifespans, emotions, abilities, but none were as inconceivable as the one today. A half-eaten bun? Even Lan Tinqiu couldn't contain his surprise, and he sputtered dumbfounded. What's the meaning of this? Are you saying that that I'm only worth a half-eaten bun? The crowd snickered and laughed. Someone called out,
What's wrong with the bun? You're getting off easy, so shut up.
Xiaolian could tell that disparaging voice. Oh, whoops. That was Shijing Xuan. Let's redo that one. The crowd snickered and laughed. Someone called out, What's wrong with the bun? You're getting off easy, so shut up. Xialian could tell that the despairing voice belonged to Xie Xuan, who was hiding among the crowd of ghosts. Just as he was caught between laughing or crying, Huatang coaxed him to continue. Come on, it's the last round. Don't be nervous. I'm not nervous, Xialian argued. The two stayed like that, hands still touching, and shook a few times. Even though Xialian was truly not nervous, there was still a light sheen of sweat on the hand sandwiched between the cup and Huatang's palm. Finally, the movement came to a stop. It was time for the reveal. He drew a small breath, then opened the lid. The dice were 2 sixes. Xialian let out a sigh of relief, aware of what had transpired, and he gazed up at Huatang. Huatang arched his brows. Oh, I lost. Even though he acted serious when admitting his loss, he didn't sound the least bit sincere. The crowd below was engulfed in silence. There had been people grumbling earlier.
If this round doesn't count, then when will it count?
Now the answer was clear. It counts when this guy wins. That level of generosity was almost insane. Even so, no one dared to comment. The croupier from before took the black wooden gambling cup and raised it up high. Congratulations to Gongzi. You've won this round. Everyone graciously gave face and cheered.
Chengju showed us a perfect loss. Beautiful. Wasn't the winner personally taught by Chengju? He won because Chengju taught him himself.
That's right. Learning the correct dice gambling posture today really opened my eyes. So much benefit gained. So much that it'd take more than 10 years to reap it all. Listening to the voices of the swarming devils from all around, Xialian couldn't help but smile. Seeing his mirth, Huacheng also chuckled and gave the red curtains a flick. At that point, Lang Tinto called out from above. "Since you lost, you should let me down." Huacheng continued to stare at Xialian, his smile unchanging, and his gaze not moving from Xialian's own. He simply lifted his hand and gave an easy wave, and Lang Tencho came crashing heavily down. Xialian winced at the loud crash. Xie Suen couldn't risk exposing himself, so he couldn't rush forward. Instead, Xialian turned and bent down to check up on the god. "Are you okay?" Lan Tincho crawled to his feet and dusted himself off. "I'm good, thank you. He probably wanted you to go up there so that he could cheat and make you lose. Thank goodness you won." Xialian thought, "You're completely mistaken. If he didn't go easy on me, even if the whole world turned to ash, I would still never be able to win you back." Just as he was thinking that, there was suddenly a crisp tinkling of bells, and the sound was followed by gasps of shock from all around. Xialian turned his head to look, and it turned out that Huateng had finally emerged from behind the silk-red curtains. In his previous youthful form, Huateng always sported a slightly crooked ponytail, but now his raven black locks tumbled loose over his vibrant red clothing, and an evil aura radiated from his handsome figure. Only a thin braid on the right side, tied at the end with a red coral bead, brought a hint of mischief to the mix. The vambraces were silver, the straps on his boots were silver, the belt was also silver, even the long, slender scimitar that hung at his waist was silver, its curves smooth and peculiar. Just like that long, slender blade, the man himself was slender and tall. He was leaning against the parted curtains, with crossed arms and a faint smile. "Guga, you've beaten me." Xialian obviously knew what had happened, and said in resignation, "Please stop teasing me." Huachang quirked his brow. "I'm not. Why would I?" Down below, the crowd of ghosts were bustling with excitement, bubbling like boiling water. Each of them thrilled as they whispered among themselves.
Xiu changed his skin again today. I'm dying. This new skin is killing me. It's so tender and firm. What do you mean dying, old hag? Aren't you already dead?
It would seem that Huatang never showed his true form in public, and also changed skins quite frequently. None of the ghosts in Ghost City knew what he really looked like, and they assumed that this must be another of his fake skins. Only Celian knew that the one standing before him was the genuine crimson rainsought flower of legend. Celian stared at the young man in red. "You..." He wanted to say something, but countless eyes from all around were focused on them, and Huatang's attitude was incredibly ambiguous, like he knew him, but also didn't. Xialian didn't know if Huatang could so publicly admit their acquaintance in Ghost City, and didn't know if he was acting this way intentionally, so he couldn't say much other than, "Thank you." "Why thank him?" Lang Tincho demanded. "He owns this place. He bore ill intentions from the start." Xialian replied under his breath, "Your Highness, please stop talking and let's get out of here." If they were to stick around, he really didn't know what else would come out of Lang Tinto's mouth, considering the mission at hand. Xialian couldn't afford to stay long. He glanced at Huatang a few more times and pushed Lang Tinto toward the exit. But as he was doing so, Huatang's voice called after him. "Hold it." Xialian stopped in his tracks and looked back. The chatter among the crowd started up again.
Changzhu, you can't let them go like this. That guy's suspicious. Look how strong he is. He's probably not as simple as he seems. If you ask me, they need to be kept and interrogated.
Exactly. Who knows if he's a spy from whatever organization to cause trouble on our turf? The last sentence was a dagger to the heart. They really did come from the heavens, but their intent wasn't to cause trouble, but rather simply investigate the situation. Xiaolian wasn't sure if Huatang had seen the spiritual light that Lang Tinchou released in his moment of peril, and he wasn't 100% certain Huatang would let him go if he did see. Xiaolian was growing increasingly anxious, but the tone Huatang spoke in was laid back. Shouldn't you leave the prize behind? Xiaolian was lost. Prize? Lang Chengqiu put himself in front of Xiaolian and questioned warily. Are you going back on your word now? But Xiaolian thought, Sunlung would never go back on his promises. Could he mean something else? With that, he stepped out from behind Lang Chengqiu and asked, But didn't I already win the bet? It's true. Gaga won against me just now, Huatang replied. But don't forget you lost a round before that. Xiaolian blinked. But you said not to worry, 'cause it didn't count, right? Even though it took some really thick skin to say something as embarrassing as, it doesn't count when I lose. Only when I win. Xiaolian still said it. Huachang replied, Of course. The rounds when you bet against me didn't count. What I'm referring to is the first round you gambled at the long table. It was then that Xiaolian finally remembered. Huachang was referring to when he tested out the lowest he could roll and ended up throwing double sixes instead. Lang Tenchou spat darkly. I told you he had ill intentions and wouldn't let us leave here so easily. I will not be sealed again. It sounded like he was already prepared for another fight and was eager to jump at the chance, but Xiaolian pulled him back. It's fine, don't be nervous. We don't need to use our fists. On the other end, Huachang tilted his head. How about it, Gaga? Do you admit your loss? Willing to bet, willing to lose? Other than obediently conceding his defeat, what could he do? And so, Celia nodded. I admit it. Huachang extended his left hand with an open palm. Then give me the promised prize. The promised prize? After some hesitation, Xiaolian reached into his left sleeve, felt around, and fished out a half-eaten bun. Unable to look Huatang in the eye, he bold-facedly presented it. Did you mean this? Truth be told, when he took out the bun, Xiaolian felt the thick skin he had grown over 800 years crumble a little, unable to hold up. The ghosts in the hall had long since been stricken speechless, and were quietly watching this play out. Never mind that it was Chengxiu's first time betting against someone, and the stakes were a half-eaten bun. Maybe Chengxiu was just having a bit of fun, but to think Chengxiu had actually, in all seriousness, pursued the person to ask for this bun. Speechless. There really was nothing to say. If there were even ghosts who couldn't help but spin an absurd theory, either there was some sort of enormous secret hidden within that bun, or that his person was actually Chengxiu's older brother. Huatong, however, merely grinned broadly as he received the bun, gave it a look, and waved it around in his hand. I've claimed my prize. Seeing that he actually took it, Xiaolian didn't know what to say. A good moment passed before he responded. It's cold, and maybe a little hard. That's all right. I don't mind, Huachang said. Such an answer left Xiaolian unable to respond, and since he had already said all that he could, he turned around and headed toward the exit. Earlier, when the ghosts of the gambler's den parted for him, it was simply because he was the first to go up, and that made him a brave warrior. Now, when they parted for him, their eyes filled with admiration and curiosity. As Xiaolian left, he could hear the ghosts behind him ask,
Tongxiu, where are you headed now?
Hua Chang replied lazily, I'm in an agreeable mood today. To Paradise Manor. At his response, the hall erupted into festive cheers. Xiaolian couldn't help taking another glance back. Hua Chang had also turned around, still with the half-eaten bun in his hand. He gave it a playful toss, then casually took a bite out of it. His gaze locked on Xiaolian as he did so. Xiaolian's step faltered at the sight. For some reason, he suddenly felt that sticking around here for a moment longer would be a bad idea. He quickened his pace, turning around and dragging Leng Tianqiu in tow. The two left the gambler's den and ran like madmen down the long stretch of road, almost knocking over several food stalls along the way. Just when they had finally arrived at a quiet, far-removed alley, Xie Qingxuan popped up and reunited with him. Xie Qingxuan fanned himself with such vigor that his hair whirled wildly in the wind. That was so close, so close. Oh my god, that was so scary. My face turned white as those ghosts. Xiaolian's heart was racing too. Perhaps he ran too hard? Lang Tenchou spoke up. Yeah, Lord Windmaster, your face still seems very pale right now. Shi Jingxuan felt his face and smiled. Is that so? This isn't from fright. That's just what I was born with. Tencho, you're a martial god who watches over a territory. You know that, right? Could you act so rashly? We're in the middle of the ghost realm here. If you were caught and exposed, the word going out would be that heavenly officials in disguise were infiltrating the ghost realm, disrupting the peace between the three realms with their bizarre behavior. How could we explain that to the emperor? Lang Tencho hung his head obediently and admitted his wrongdoing. I'm sorry. I was too rash earlier. He raised his head. But those gamblers were crazy. If that man had flipped a cup, whether he won or lost, the outcome would have been terrible. Either his rivals or his daughter would suffer the consequences. It was that anger that made me crush the cup. Shi Jingxuan chided. Even so, you shouldn't have jumped in by yourself, right? Lang Chencho blinked. Then what should I have done? Lord Windmaster, if I didn't charge in, no one else would have. His question was so genuine that Xie Qingxuan didn't know how to respond. He tapped his fan lightly against his temple. Well... Xiaolian smiled softly. Forget it. Lang Chencho looked at him. Xiaolian continued. I think that even if His Highness Taihua was caught, he wouldn't have confessed his identity no matter how he was interrogated. But to prevent others from picking up any clues to your words, it would be best for your Highness to be prudent and avoid capture going forward. Lang Tencho nodded. Okay, I understand. Shi Qingxuan said, All right, let's not talk about this anymore. Oh, right, Your Highness. This Your Highness made both Xiaolian and Lang Tencho turn their heads at the same time, and Xie Qingxuan clarified, Oh, I meant the elder. Xiaolian rubbed his forehead a little dejectedly. Elder. All right, I am a little older, but not by much. Is that what... And they talk... Why is it when they talk about me, they always make it sound like I'm a grandpa? Xie Qingxuan continued. Your Highness, have you two met at the palace of the Divine Might? If not, let me introduce you. This is the Crown Prince of Yong'an, Lang Jinqiu, martial god of the East. This is the Crown Prince of Xianle, Xiaolian, a heavenly official who collects great commendation from the Heavenly Emperor. Even though Xie Qingxuan stumbled and didn't say the words, Xiaolian knew exactly what came after. Collect scraps. What else? Since the words were abruptly swapped in mid-sentence, there was no time to adjust the grammar, only clumsily change the course of the statement. When Lang Chencho heard, however, he looked at Xiaolian and asked in amazement, So you're that highness who ascended 3 times? It appeared that Lang Tencho had really slept through the entire meeting at the Palace of Divine Might and didn't even remember who he was. Anyone else saying that to Celian would no doubt mean it as a sarcastic comment. But because this question came from Lang Tencho, Celian wholeheartedly believed that this child genuinely thought ascending 3 times was just a bit curious. His eyes twinkled. Yes, that would be me. Lang Tencho responded. Thanks so much for helping me earlier. If you hadn't... He remembered something and hurriedly looked down and started to tuck his belt in, tying it properly, fear still lingering. He obviously didn't think much about the history between the kingdom of Xianle and the kingdom of Yong'an. Shi Qingxuan seemed to think that this introduction was good enough. He turned to Celian. Your Highness! I thought Crimson Rain Flower knew you. Why did he act as if he didn't back there? Lang Zhenqiu finished tying his belt. Was that really Crimson Rain Flower? Was that his true form? Celian didn't even have time to open his mouth before Shi Qingxuan piped up. How could it be his true form? Huatang has 10,000 different disguises, and no one knows what his true form looks like. Last time, when I was at Banyue Pass, he looked similar to his appearance today. So this must be a fake skin too. It's all fake, all fake. Celian could still remember that night at Puti's shrine, when Huatang had told him, Next time we meet, I'll greet you in my true form. He thought to himself, it's real. But of course he didn't say that out loud. Everyone was so sure that Huatang must be wearing a fake skin. Being the only one who knew it was Crimson Rainsought Flower's true form was like learning an extraordinary little secret. Then he thought, Sunlung's appearance doesn't look that much different from before. Only a bit older and taller. That means he was pretty much in his true form the first time he met me. Strangely, that made Celian feel a little happy. Shi Qingxuan added, Every time everyone says Huatang is a strange character, and that really seems to be true. It was obvious he was going easy on you, yet he pretended in all seriousness not to know you. Who knows what he's up to? Could it be that he wants us to drop our guard? Celian choked and coughed. Just as he thought anyone could tell Huatang was going easy on him back in the gambler's den. But rather than saying he went easy on him, they might as well have just outright said Huatang was literally letting him win. Lang Zhenqiu was the only one who couldn't tell. He frowned. Did he go easy on him? Why? The other two patted him on the shoulder and decided with great tacit understanding, that it was best not to explain it to him. They left Lang Zhenqiu standing there by himself to mull over why Huatang would go so easy on Celian, and whether it was because the two knew each other. Celian and Shi Qingxuan turned to walk off. We've been discovered now, I guess, Celian said. What's our next plan of action? Switch our disguises and try again? Personally, I don't think that doing that will change anything. After His Highness Taihua's fight back there, Ghost City will probably strengthen their security. Shi Qingxuan replied, To be honest, I had considered the possibility of us getting exposed, but I never thought it would happen this soon. Celian sighed. I know. What's done is done, Shi Qingxuan said. Since our cover is blown, you might as well just walk in with confidence and do this openly. Celian could vaguely guess what he had meant by openly. Sure enough, Shi Qingxuan explained, if we want to smooth out the lie, then the only way is to have you go find Huatang and tell him that you came here specifically to visit him. He knows that you're a heavenly official, right? If so, then let him believe that... if so, then it's believable that you've brought a couple of your little friends from heaven along with you. Yet unexpectedly, before Xiaolian could answer, Lang Tenchou cried out at the suggestion. No! Shi Qingxuan looked at him. Why not? Lang Tenchou replied seriously. Your Highness Shenla, do you really know Crimson Rain sought flower? I heard your conversation earlier. It seems you two are friends? Xiaolian nodded. Then of course that plan is not feasible, Lang Tenchou said. Even though he's a ghost king, and he's no saint, the fact he went easy on you must mean that he sees you as a friend. And no one should ever deceive a friend. Shi Qingxuan could feel an oncoming headache. Oh my god, oh my god, Chengqiu, you stubborn mule. Lang Chengqiu beamed. You agree with me, right? How is that? Shi Qingxuan protested. The three of us are heavenly officials, you know. If we report back empty-handed, people will no doubt say that our success rate is even lower than the Palace of Ling Wen's. And what an utter embarrassment that would be. Cillian grinned, but just as he was about to speak, a terrible ruckus erupted from behind them and made the three turn their heads. Just outside of the alley, a mob of nefarious creatures ran past with raised fists, shouting, Where's that brat with the bandaged face? Where is he? Seeing the other two gods' alarm, Cielian reassured, Don't worry, they're not after us. Just as the words left his lips, their ears were pierced by a shrill, deafening cry.